A thread by Stu Swerk. IRGC and IRI futures. The Iranians have been keeping somewhat of a low profile since the Islamic Republican Guard Corps IRGC commander Qasem Soleimani was taken out by a drone strike at Baghdad International Airport on the 3rd of January. Although they've been concentrating on executing regime resistors lately in order to tighten internal controls of the population, from Heshmat Alavi, I'm desperately asking for help from anyone who can hear my voice, says Navid Afkari's mother. Navid is sentenced to death and his two brothers to 81 years in prison for protesting in August 2018. Please be their voice. Hashtag stop executions in Iran. I suspect that the mullahs running the Islamic Republic of Iran, IRI, got a few tight sphincters when the UAE normalized relations with and ended its economic boycott of Israel after a US brokered deal was reached on 13 August. From AlJazeera.com, UAE scraps Israel economic boycott after US brokered deal. Of course, the moribund U.S. foreign policy establishment poo-pooed this major breakthrough facilitated by the Trump administration, with the thoroughly corrupt Brookings Institute even suggesting that the Dementia Joe factor was the key element behind the deal. From Brookings.edu, the Biden factor in the UAE-Israel deal. Crackpot thinking by Brookings. These clowns, who have received millions from Qatar, are transparent and probably auditioning for jobs in a Biden State Department. Perish the thought. So, what does the future hold for the Islamic Republic of Iran? Is it possible that Iran's government gets any more awful than it already is? It seems the answer is yes, it could. Here are some excerpts from a recent article about what the IRI's internal politics, with emphasis on the IRGC. A new saying is making the rounds in Iran. Power is being sucked away from heads to toes, which is to say, from men who wear turbans to men who wear boots. Iran's new parliament furnishes the most recent evidence. Its speaker, Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, is a former brigadier general of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. 2/3 of the parliament's presiding board are either former members or still affiliated with the IRGC and its auxiliary organizations. Many in Iran and in the United States have long foreseen the IRGC takeover of the Iranian government. The next step toward that outcome would be for a candidate affiliated with the IRGC to be elected president in 2021. That Iran will soon have a military-run government is not a foregone conclusion, but it seems increasingly to be the most likely. Iranians are frustrated with partisan tensions and compounding crises. U.S. sanctions have drained the country's economic lifeblood. Purchasing power parity has decreased to 2/3 of what it was a decade ago, even as the public's obsession with wealth has grown exponentially. Wounded pride and resentment that Iranians cannot enjoy the international prestige they deserve by giving rise to a novel form of nationalism. The IRGC presents itself as the cure for Iran's national malaise, but it is in fact a big contributor to the problem. Its regional exploits dim the country's prospects for sustained and steady development. Under United States sanctions, the IRGC expanded an underground economy, complete with a new corrupt elite of smuggling entrepreneurs. The IRGC prevents the government from recruiting experts whom it deems politically unfit, and it derails government policies and projects at will. All the time, it issues propaganda, insisting that politicians and bureaucrats are to blame. The IRGC has many advantages in the contest for power in the Islamic Republic, but it is hardly an unstoppable monolith. Despite the large economic stake that the IRGC now holds, Iran's executive branch still governs the economy in all critical domains. The government makes fiscal and monetary policy, controls oil and gas resources, and runs the country's treasury. The government also dominates social welfare and humanitarian aid, on which the IRGC increasingly relies to build its own networks of patronage. Iran's upcoming presidential election is widely expected to herald the return of hardliners to power. The reformists have lost most of their social capital and their standing, but 2021 will not mark the end of politics in Iran. On the contrary, it will only add a new chapter to an open-ended book. The conflict among Iran's political elites has existed since the founding of the Islamic Republic and will continue to produce opportunities for change. Change even of a kind and in a manner that may appeal to neither the opposition nor the ruling elites. Read the rest of the analysis here. The Revolutionary Guards are poised to take over Iran, from foreignaffairs.com. That article provides a realistic assessment of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and Iran moving toward an increasingly military dictatorship. The IRGC will continue to be massively corrupt, even as it probably expands its control and direct ownership over further key areas of the economy and of the military-industrial complex. The political decline of relatively moderate civilians like Rouhani, the civilian technocrats, and the Bazari business class in government means the Iranian domestic and foreign policies will tend to be further radicalized. It is even possible that in the next couple of years, a Maoist-like Islamic cultural revolution will be ignited, spearheaded by the IRGC and blessed by Ayatollah Khamenei, to refresh the population's revolutionary fervor, decisively purge moderates and reformists, and consolidate all power in the IRGC. Although there are few realists in its leadership, the IRGC is not known for its moderation in avoiding or de-escalating confrontations with the USA. They do recognize the limitations on their conventional military power and American overall military supremacy, but they will always seek asymmetric, unconventional ways to obtain revenge for defeats, embarrassments, or humiliations at the hands of the US, even months later. Despite decades of being the most favored preeminent military force, the IRGC and its naval and air components still rely on the more technically oriented, competent regular armed forces for nearly all the major depot-level maintenance of their platforms. The IRGC continues to value above all the recruiting of politically and religiously reliable, poorly educated country boys who lack understanding of things like naval propulsion and aviation avionics systems. They love a guy who has memorized the entire Quran, even if he has no idea how to repair a jet engine or a marine motor. Relevant to this dichotomy is Iranian nuclear development for peaceful purposes or for weapons. The IRGC may exert political control over nuclear programs, but it is still largely dependent upon well-educated civilian technocrats and scientists in this area who may lack the preferred Islamist and political bona fides. Even if only 20% or even just 2% of Iranians support the Islamic Revolution regime and its ideology, the IRGC and the radicals have a stable, long-running, well-entrenched, countrywide, efficient police state that can maintain control indefinitely by terror, manipulation of all information, and by controlling economic rewards and punishments at all levels of society. We must not read too much into the occasional rise of protests like the Green Movement of 2009 and 2010, or the temporary rise of so-called reformist or moderate politicians like the late Rafsanjani or Rouhani. Just like the Arab Spring of 2011, they have proven to be fragile, evanescent phenomena so far without real legs. As for Supreme Leader Ayatollah Khamenei, he is now just 81, born in April 1939, and historically, all the males in his family have lived and functioned into their mid to late 90s, so do not expect a change at the top anytime soon. But then, the IRGC leadership may have other ideas.